What is up, you guys, and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having an amazing December so far. We just released the Real Life Grinch episode on Crime After Crime, the podcast that I co-host with John Lorden. Definitely suggest you guys go listen to those. It involves Johnny Cash and a crime that you may have never known happened. But I do want to let you guys know as well that I have family staying with me over the next couple of months, so you're going to see me play musical rooms in my house in order to film all of my videos. I'm actually hoping solves my echo issue. I might be able to find the perfect spot. But to get back on track, today we're going to be speaking about a truly mind-boggling and heinous murder of an elderly couple that happened in their own home in Putnam County, Georgia in 2014. Their family has remained very, very quiet about this. Obviously, this is a lot to go through. It is not the first loss that this family has experienced, and I'm honestly very thankful that Sheriff Sills, who has been on the case from the moment it happened until now, is so dedicated to getting answers for this family. Because one of the scariest things about this case is that there are lots of indicators that whoever committed this crime had done something before that was at least similar and either will do it again or already has done it again. Now, before I get into the details of the case, I do first need to thank Hunt a Killer for partnering with me on today's video. You guys know how much I personally enjoy Hunt a Killer, and if you're not aware of what it is and haven't heard me rave about it before, it's actually an immersive murder mystery subscription box that I know you guys would absolutely love. This season, Beth Ferris Hendricks' death is declared an accident in the small town of Mallory Rock, Maine. But Beth's sister Gwen believes that this was no accident, so she sets out to prove that Beth was actually murdered. In doing so, Gwen is forced to investigate residents of the town that she has grown up with her entire life. And to catch the killer, Beth needs your help to expose her own hometown and uncover all the secrets of Mallory Rock. So each month you basically receive this box straight to your doorstep containing evidence, documents, audio recordings, and many other items that you have to use to get to the truth. You have to identify murder weapons, eliminate suspects. It's all so realistic and so tricky. And each box pushes the storyline further and sometimes makes you rethink your previous theories. Honestly, a really great break for me and the rut that I tend to get stuck in during the winter where all I want to do is sit on my couch and watch YouTube videos. Plus, you don't even have to subscribe, which is a really huge perk. If you're the kind of person that doesn't want to sit and wait every single month for a new box to come, there's plenty of other one-off mysteries that you can purchase on the website, or you can even get whole collections of previous seasons that still need to be solved. And my absolute favorite part of Hunt a Killer is that a portion of proceeds from every single box goes to the Cold Case Foundation, which is one of my favorite foundations to support. And I feel like while you're solving fictional cases, you're also helping them solve real ones, which is really awesome. I will say, if you plan on getting this for yourself for Christmas or others, you need to get your orders in by the 15th to make sure you get your gifts on time. Right now, you can go to huntakiller.com/Danielle Hallen and use code Hallen for $10 off your first purchase. Again, make sure to use code Hallen for $10 off your purchase. Thank you again to Hunt a Killer for partnering with me on today's video. It is companies like them consistently supporting my channel that allow me to create these videos and also allow me to make donations to families to support their search efforts or their efforts to justice. So now on to the details of this case. This one is going to frustrate you guys to absolutely no end. Both Russell and Shirley were from New Jersey. Russell graduated from Farley Dickinson University before deciding to join the Navy, and he was actually in World War II. Once he was done in the Navy, he went on to become an executive for a clock manufacturing company and eventually met the love of his life, Shirley. Shirley, as I said, also grew up in New Jersey and attended Barnard College, and after meeting Russell, they went on to have 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl. Russell continued to work for the clock company, and Shirley stayed home with their children until around the 80s when they decided to move to Georgia. Upon moving to Georgia, Russell also kind of switched up his career. He was no longer working in the clock company anymore and began to manage a bunch of different Hardee's fast food restaurants, I believe mainly around the Atlanta area, but across Georgia. And so he would manage some of them and roped his children in as well to kind of get them into the industry and hopefully have something to leave them when he decided to retire, which is exactly what happened around the mid-90s. Russell retired and he was ready to finish his life with Shirley, living out the dreams that he had worked so hard for his entire life. And Shirley was ready to have her husband home with her all of the time. And their end goal was to retire to a golf community by Lake Oconee in Georgia to live the rest of their life in peace. Shortly before 2000, however, when they were making those plans, tragedy struck the family. One of their sons had struggled a lot with addiction, and unfortunately, while trying to make a drug purchase in Atlanta, he was shot and killed. This was a devastating blow, but thankfully, her son did receive some sort of justice. The killer was found, tried, and put in prison for life. At this point, they were adamant that they settle down in a safe community and provide a place for the remaining children and their now 9 grandchildren to come and stay with them. So they settled on a $1 million home in the Great Water subdivision right off of Lake Oconee. So the neighborhood pretty much stretched along Lake Oconee, and their home in particular sat right along like a cove. They were right on the edge of the lake. They had their own private dock. They had, I think, like 3,200 square feet to make sure that all of their children and grandchildren could come and visit them. And it was nice because it kind of felt like an escape. It was surrounded by woods, they had access to the water, and they were in a subdivision that is one of the best ones you can live in the area. The crime rate was low, they had surveillance there. I'm pretty sure they had 24/7 guards, so it felt like a really safe, nice area. And everything went exactly as they had hoped. They had their grandchildren over almost every single summer to enjoy the lake. They spent lots of time together. They were very dedicated to the Oconee Community Church. They instantly made friends with all of their neighbors. They loved grabbing lunch with friends and having friends over for dinner. They were just really kind, sweet, and happy individuals, and everybody loved them. They didn't know a stranger, and they had absolutely no enemies. Russell spent a ton of time golfing. That was one of his favorite things to do, along with his children. And he also loved to catch up on his favorite TV shows. He would sit in his sunroom and enjoy them. And Shirley loved to work on crossword puzzles. She would pretty much do every single one that came in the morning on the newspaper. She loved to play bridge. She loved working in her garden, and she was also an avid writer. They were so happy with their life, and imagine being that age and, you've gone through tragedy, you've worked so hard, but you're finally exactly where you'd always envisioned yourself being. And they were so happy there that they made it very clear that whenever it was their time to go, they wanted their ashes spread over Lake Oconee. This is where they found peace, and this is where they wanted to remain. But someone horrifically took their lives and all of the peace they found in the place that they had wanted to remain forever. On Saturday, May 3rd, 2014, the Dermonds had plans to attend a party at a neighbor's home. It was actually the weekend of the 140th Kentucky Derby, so there was going to be a Kentucky Derby watch party at this house. But Russell and Shirley never showed up. As you can imagine, the neighbors weren't really all that concerned at first. They were an older couple. Russell was 88 years old. Shirley was 87. Sometimes people that are older, they get tired. They don't feel like going out. Something comes up. There's a change of plans. And I feel like once you're at that point in your life, you usually just don't really question it. But after the next couple of days, when the neighbors tried to reach out to the Dermonds by phone, noticed that there really was no activity in the house, they became very concerned. So on Tuesday, May 6th, their neighbors decided to go and check on them. Immediately, even upon entering the driveway, they knew something likely was not right, because the 3rd was the watch party. That was a Saturday. It is now Tuesday the 6th, and the paper from that day, Tuesday the 6th, and the paper from Monday the 5th were still sitting in the driveway. And when they checked the mail from that Saturday, the 3rd, was also still there. So they went up to the door, knocked on the door, and tried to receive some sort of answer, and unfortunately, no one replied. So they decided to try the handle, and sure enough, the house was unlocked, which was not normal for the Dermonds. They went inside the home, and from all first appearances, everything seemed okay. The house was in order. There was nothing out of place, nothing that seemed to be missing. Everything looked as if it normally would on an everyday basis. Everything was clean, kitchen was tidy. There was even a newspaper dated the 2nd, which was the Friday prior, where it was obvious that Shirley had done at least half of the crossword puzzle. Everything seemed fine. But it was odd because no one in the home seemed to be answering. They weren't in their bedroom, but both Shirley and Russell's phones were still in the house, and so was Shirley's purse. So the neighbors decided, you know what, we're going to go into the garage, check to see if their cars are still there. Maybe they went out of town unexpectedly and had to hurry and leave. But when they opened the garage door, they found that both cars, a Lincoln Town car and a Lexus SUV, were still parked in their spaces. However, when they took a closer look, they discovered something disturbing. There was a pool of blood between both of the cars. And in that pool of blood was what the neighbors believed was their good friend Russell Dermond, but they weren't able to say for sure because the head was missing. Immediately, they frantically called 911 to report that they believe they found their friend Russell, and the Putnam County Sheriff's Department arrived right away. When the Sheriff's Department arrived, they found absolutely no sign of forced entry anywhere near the home, and they were shocked as well at the state of Russell's body. Not only had someone appeared to have almost perfectly decapitated him, it seemed as if they used his collar as a guide and someone took their time with it. This wasn't a sloppy, decapitation, but someone had also gone to the lengths of stuffing towels around Russell's body in an attempt to delay his body being found. They clearly did not want the blood to run out of the driveway and draw any attention to the home. But what was even more strange is that there didn't really appear to be any sign of how he died on the rest of his body, and indicating that the answers likely were with Russell's head, but they couldn't find it anywhere. And it also wasn't obvious that Russell was even killed in the area that his body was found. Also, there was absolutely no sign of Shirley anywhere. So obviously, Shirley had to be ruled out pretty quickly. She was 87 years old, but just to make sure they crossed their T's and dotted their I's, they wanted to ensure she couldn't possibly be involved in this. Right away, they saw that there were drag marks near Russell's body. Again, being an 87-year-old woman, it wasn't very likely she could have dragged her husband around the garage. Plus, there wasn't any motive. They were happily married. There was no sign of a struggle as if they got into some sort of argument or anything. It was clear Shirley had likely been kidnapped. Within an hour of arriving at the home, cadaver dogs were brought out in an attempt to search for Shirley around the area, but also to find Russell's head, since they believed that likely held a lot of answers, and also to see if there was a possible murder weapon nearby. And then within 2 hours, the sheriff's office had brought in professionals to drag the lake around the home, and authorities started going door to door to question neighbors to see if anyone saw or heard anything. Not a single neighbor claimed to hear or see any sort of commotion in the previous days at the Dermond home. Everything seemed quiet and completely okay. And this is when authorities started to believe that maybe Shirley was taken off somewhere and Russell was even taken off somewhere and killed and then brought back to the home. Surrounding woods were also searched on foot, and sonar was brought out to the lake to check as thoroughly as possible. There were a lot of deeper areas of the lake nearby, and they wanted to make sure nothing was there. The FBI was also brought on right away, and other local sheriff's departments were pretty much at the beck and call of Putnam County. The FBI put billboards up all around town with Shirley on them, saying that it was believed she was missing and in serious danger, and they were hoping that this would generate some sort of leads to come in. The Dermond children were obviously also all questioned. The crime seemed to have something personal to it. Because there was no sign of forced entry, there's obviously this thought that maybe it was someone they knew that they allowed in, but the Dermond children all had absolutely no motive. They loved their parents more than anything, and none of them were in the area at the time, so they also were ruled out. Maintenance workers in the community as well as guards were questioned since they were on watch 24/7, and most homes also had gardeners, cooks, cleaners, all sorts of things. So all of them were tracked down and questioned, but I don't believe anything really came out of this. At one point, there were even a total of 200 people interviewed in one day between the FBI and the multiple sheriff's offices working on this particular case. Sheriff Sills was able to track down their last known movements to see if there was anything strange about that. I know that Russell was spotted Thursday, May 1st, running errands. He was in town. He went to People's Bank at 2:15. There was nothing strange at all about his transaction. And then he went to Publix at 2:26, where I think he picked up like some bread or something and Shirley's prescription. He seems completely fine in the video. And then we know that Shirley did at least part of that crossword puzzle on Friday the 2nd. And then later that night on Friday the 2nd, both Shirley and Russell spoke to one of their sons on the phone. So it was kind of during the night of the 2nd into the day of the 3rd that they believed something had to have happened. I've also seen on a handful of articles that it's possible that this happened sometime early in the morning of the 3rd. Like, that is the most likely, because there are some reports that do say Russell was wearing his pajamas as if he had just woken up. So basically, the time this happened was in question. Even where this happened was in question, because no one really knew if Russell was even killed in the home. It looked more like his body was placed there and then decapitated. And the motive was also in question. Nothing from the home at all had been taken. Not their cars. Shirley's purse was out in plain sight. That wasn't taken. No one had gone through like their jewelry. So theft didn't seem to be a motive. And even if there is like a robbery that's gone wrong, usually that individual won't go to the lengths of kidnapping someone and killing someone and decapitating them. And when questioning everyone, the Dermonds children also were very adamant about the fact that Shirley and Russell kept their door locked at all times. They were crazy about it. They made sure every single door was locked. They made sure their security system was on. So this really pointed to the fact even more that somehow this was someone they trusted or knew. But when authorities checked, there really was no odd communication at all. There was no one that could list a single person that had an issue with either Russell or Shirley. Authorities and family had no clue why someone would do this to Russell and Shirley. Russell went in for an autopsy, and it was in fact found that there was really no cause of death indicated on the body. They did see that he had been beaten before he was killed, so this kind of makes you question if there was some sort of torture involved or trying to get something out of him prior to his death. But they were able to find that there was gunshot residue on some of his clothing, which really narrowed things down to he was shot, and that bullet likely went into his head, and that is likely why he was decapitated and the head has not been found. Sheriff Sills believes that whoever is responsible for the death of Russell had used this gun possibly in a crime before, and they knew that if authorities got their hands on that bullet, that they'd be able to match it back to the gun, which would lead them to the killer. Or this person's just overly paranoid and doesn't want anyone to ever match it to a gun that they've had before, so they took it to completely clean up the crime scene. And since many parts of this crime seemed very well planned and thought out, it would make sense that a seasoned criminal for some reason acted it out. Since the neighborhood was so heavily guarded, they decided to look into the surveillance that was from the front gate to see if maybe they captured anyone strange entering the neighborhood, a car that didn't live there in the middle of the night. But unfortunately, 2 weeks prior, there had been a really bad storm that knocked the cameras out. So there was absolutely no footage. Authorities had nothing until May 16th. Fishermen 5 to 6 miles away from the Dermond home found Shirley's body floating face down in the water, and authorities were called. When authorities arrived, what they found was equally as disturbing as what had been done to Russell. Shirley had 2 30-pound cinder blocks tied to her ankles, and she had been thrown in one of the deepest parts of the lake. And this changed a lot. Authorities were no longer certain that this person came in through the front gates, but instead this person had to have had a boat at some point to dump Shirley's body. So now they wondered if they somehow remained so evasive because they slowly pulled into that cove at night or early in the morning, parked their boat at the dock at the Dermonds' home, and that is how they kind of stayed out of everyone's sight. This wasn't a situation where they took advantage of a boat already being at the dock, and the Dermonds did not have a boat at the time, so this had to have been theirs, or I don't think there was any reports of a stolen boat nearby, and this lake did in fact have a public access, so anyone with any sort of boat, canoe, kayak, whatever it may be, could have taken this to the Dermonds' home. But then that also leads to this idea that either this person was very familiar with this lake and was a local, possibly lived on the lake, or they just studied a map for a very long time because the Dermonds lived in kind of a weird offhand cove. Shirley was taken in for an autopsy, and it was found that she had been dead at least since Russell had been found on the 6th. They weren't exactly able to say how long it had been. She died of blunt force trauma. There were multiple blows to her head by some sort of claw-like hammer, and apparently her wounds were so deep that they believed this was kind of like a frenzied kill. There was something different about this murder. Also, based on the extent of Shirley's injuries, there should have been obvious signs in the house of a struggle and of her murder if that's where it had happened. But because there wasn't one, again, authorities knew the location of murder was somewhere else and they had no idea where. Another search was conducted after Shirley's body was found with state-of-the-art technology to try to find in this area, yet again, potentially Russell's head or this weapon that was used to kill Shirley. They just really needed something to push the case further. They were grasping at straws, trying everything they could. They were literally leaving no stone unturned, but somehow whoever did this managed to leave nothing behind. Lake Oconee is 19,000 acres, stretching across, I believe, 4 separate counties. There's 400 miles of shoreline and absolutely no possible way to search every bit of the lake. And if this person went 5 to 6 miles away to dump Shirley, if they also took the murder weapon with them and Russell's head, they could have gone however many miles they wanted to dump that and prevent that from being found. Years passed and Sheriff Sills worked diligently on the case, chasing down every possible lead. You guys, there have been serial killers that have been thought to possibly be involved. They've been reached out to by different psychics, like professors, people that have documents they've put together trying to help solve this case and lead towards different individuals that they believe could possibly be involved. And no matter how goofy some of these tips may seem, Sheriff Sills still made sure to rule them out fully because you just really never know. More crimes that are even somewhat similar have been looked into for possible connections, and still it's led to nothing. A witness did come forward at some point stating that they did see a man in the Dermonds' yard the day that they believe this crime occurred, but the witness was unable to provide a description. Despite years and years of searching and digging deeper into the Dermonds' lives and their businesses, a motive has still yet to be found. Everything is pristine. They were just a happy, regular family trying to live their lives. And how they ended up becoming targets of this kind of act of violence is a mystery and devastating to everyone that knows them. One thing that I really appreciate about this case is that Sheriff Sills is very candid. He is blunt, he is open, he is honest, and he has sat down multiple times with different investigators. He sat down with different news stations, journalists to talk openly about this case because he believes someone out there knows something, that eventually someone's going to crack, someone's going to give some of the details up to someone, have to get this off their chest, and they're really hoping that someone out there with information will come forward so they continue to talk about it. And he has sat down and spoken about his theories, which I thought was absolutely great, obviously, because I want to understand his mindset and the way that he's looking at this. And he's also spoken about theories that he's pretty much ruled out that he's seen floating around. And one thing that I found very interesting that he said was that speculation really gets you nowhere, that he focuses on the facts, the solid things in the case, and that eventually does lead to something. And his just persistent hope and knowledge that if he works hard enough, he'll get answers and be able to get the Dermonds justice and closure for their family is really awesome to see. So one theory that kind of went around a lot right afterwards was that somehow the Dermonds murders were connected to their son's murder. However, this has for the most part been ruled out. Obviously, nothing I think is fully ruled out until they know the exact answer. But this was 14 years later, and the person that killed their son was put in prison. And yes, I understand coming back and trying to get revenge, but after 14 years, I just don't know how likely that is. It just kind of seems like a stretch. Obviously, robbery, again, people still have this theory, but the Dermonds were not the richest in that neighborhood by a long shot. They, I think, had a net worth of like 1.5 million, and over half of that was their $1 million home. So there really wasn't a whole lot to take from them. A lot of people have made a really good point as well that if someone was trying to come after their money, they likely would have needed them alive, especially because their house was a large portion of their money, and they wouldn't have been immediately killed the way that they were. Some people believe that this was actually the work of a hitman. And when I've initially told this story to a handful of people in my life, that's kind of what they have immediately gone to as well. And I can completely understand where people are seeing this. And if I had to choose out of everything I've heard so far, this sounds like it's definitely possible. Aspects of this crime scream career criminal, leaving absolutely no trace behind. Somehow killing someone in a different place, bringing them back without leaving a trail of blood, especially if Russell was shot in the head, and also possibly did this during broad daylight, coming on a boat. I mean, this sounds like something out of a movie. I can understand the thought of a hitman, but police do not at all believe this is the case because there's a lot of things about this particular case that also are very, very sloppy. They believe that Shirley's murder, in terms of this being a hitman, does not add up. For example, they claim that the 30-pound cinder blocks on her feet, someone that had done this before would have known that's not going to keep her down. So this was just someone using some crazy idea they saw online and trying to accomplish it, and they didn't do it correctly. So they don't think someone that was a hitman would have done this the way that they did. I'm still not convinced this was not the act of a hitman, which is honestly terrifying. If I were in the community, I would be horrified. I know that this caused a lot of fear throughout the community. There were some people that had vacation homes there that they no longer go to because the killer has not been captured. But the reason I believe it's still possible is because authorities have also stated they believe this was acted out by more than one person. And I personally believe whoever killed Russell is not the same person that killed Shirley. It's two completely different acts, and Shirley seemed a lot more personal. It almost seems like there was this anger in terms of Shirley's. There was this emotion behind it, frustration. And this kind of leads to the possibility of the theory authorities believe the most likely, which is extortion. Sheriff Sills has stated that extortion seems like it makes the most sense, that someone thought the Dermonds had something that they just didn't have. And unfortunately, because they didn't have it, it led to their death, something that never should have happened to them. Maybe it was someone that they knew or was kind of close to them, and this person made assumptions based on maybe their house or the way that they spoke about things. And then when they were pushed in a corner and demands were made and threats were made, there likely wasn't a struggle because of that. I think it's possible at this point they were taken out of the home, taken somewhere else. And when Russell wouldn't give things up, maybe they shot him, hoping that it would push Shirley to answer their questions. And then when she wouldn't answer or confirm that they did not have what these people were looking for, out of frustration, they killed her differently than they did Russell. They were very angry and frustrated, and that's why it was so hostile and violent the way that they killed her. It's just very scary to know that these people or this person is still out there. Someone capable of doing this to a sweet and innocent couple trying to live out the rest of their life is gut-wrenching, and it's scary. And that's why the story needs to get out there, because this could have happened to somebody else, and someone out there may know and may be able to connect the dots. And with a case like this, the more people that are aware and can find connections, like the true crime community could really, really do this case some good. If these connections are made, there could be evidence from one case that's possibly related that helps break this case wide open. There is not a ton of evidence in this case. Authorities have stated that something was in fact found in the garage. Like, there is evidence in the garage, but they've not released what that is. Obviously, they're going to hold on to that as tight as possible so that they have some way of solving this. Now, I do know that they have recently stated, as of May of this year, that they could potentially be led to a person of interest or a suspect soon. I don't know what they're using, but they have stated that there is more recent technology, something that wasn't available in the last 6 years, and they're going to try to use this technology to get answers. I know that Sheriff Sills has said some data from this technology they're using, which they won't say what it is, came back looking very promising, and they believe once the rest of it comes back, they will have something. I honestly hope the same, because whoever did this needs to be thrown in prison immediately so that everyone in the community and the Dermonds' children can take a deep breath for the first time in such a long time. It's unfortunate because the Dermonds' dying wishes were to have their ashes spread on Lake Oconee. They wanted to remain there forever. And the thought that that's what they wanted was to be spread over this lake, and instead Shirley was killed and thrown into it. It just totally takes everything away from them. It's just the dirtiest possible thing someone could have done. Other children feel like they cannot even fulfill those wishes because it just feels wrong. It feels wrong to spread their ashes over the same lake that they were killed and one of them was thrown in. And that is devastating and probably the most conflicting feeling ever. This never should have happened to them, and someone is walking about their day, possibly right now, knowing that they were responsible for this murder. And I'm hoping that they have opened their mouth to the wrong person who will grow a conscience and call police and give them some answers so that Sheriff Sills can finally solve this case. If you have any information at all about this particular case and the murders of Shirley and Russell Dermond, please keep in mind I keep all possible contacts listed down below for you to reach out to with any information. Also, don't ever forget that you can call into the police department and report things anonymously. You can call Crime Stoppers and report things anonymously. I know a lot of people can get scared to open their mouths in situations like this. That is all that I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Dermond story. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below to become a part of the Howlin' fam so that we can bring them home together or bring them justice together. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.